And we are going into a time of darkness, and the world is facing a time of darkness. But we are very confident that Canadians have the spirit. Canadians have the love of their land and the love of their neighbor to stand tall. So we are calling on people to be warriors for Canada at this time, to defend our values, and to not give in to the appeasement of Donald Trump and his oligarchs. We're here for you, Canada. This is the Pledge for Canada. We will take any questions that people have right now. Thank you very much. Yes, the website?
Website is engagement.
Engagement.
Pour le Canada.
Pour le Canada. Here,
Pledge
you
for
give it
Canada. So there's a live website that you can go to sign in either English or French, which lays out the terms of the pledge. And you just search for Pledge for Canada, Engagement pour le Canada. Si vous regardez vous faites une fouille sur Internet, vous allez le trouver. C'est live actuellement. Vous pouvez signer. Il y a une version anglaise et une version française. L'Engagement pour le Canada, Pledge for Canada. And we urge everybody to start by signing, and then the movement takes shape. On va passer à l'action sous peu. Merci à tous et à toutes.
Engagement-canada-pledge.ca. Please go to it. Please sign up. We'll take if there's any questions.
Sarah with the Canadian Press. I wonder, Charlie, what you make of the fact that you talked about us reaching out to our democratic allies around the world. What do you make of the fact that Canada's allies really aren't saying a whole lot about Donald Trump threatening these tariffs, threatening to make Canada the 51st state?
Well, we see certainly that Donald Trump is threatening our European allies. He's threatening Denmark and Greenland, and we know that the EU is very focused on that threat right now, because it's not just a threat against the people of Greenland, it's a threat against NATO. This is Donald Trump undermining our allies at a time of dangerous aggression from Putin. But we certainly, as we stand up and these issues start to come forward, we expect to see support from our European allies. We see that Elon Musk has interfered in Germany. We see Donald Trump is threatening regime change in the UK. This is highly dangerous, highly irresponsible. We do need to work across all party lines. And we have to work across all international lines to defend democracy.
You've talked about putting tariffs on things like Teslas. Do you think...
Did I say that? I said 200%. Did I say 200% tariffs?
Yeah, I think you did say 200%.
The douche panzer?
All right. So, I mean, sanctioning or taking action against the kind of billionaire class that's surrounded Trump right now, is that something that you think would risk retaliation?
Right now, we're facing major threat. But the issue of what we would do, I leave that to our elected officials, because I don't believe that you negotiate in public. Personally, I would throw as much heat on Elon Musk as possible, because he's a deplorable, disgraceful human being. But that's my own personal opinion. But the Pledge for Canada is about rallying Canadians so that we keep the pressure on our elected leaders not to trade away our values in these negotiations, not to trade away fundamental principles that we stand for as Canadians. So I'll leave it to the government in terms of the retaliatory steps that will be taken when the tariffs come in.
Do you have concerns about the risk of American interference in the upcoming election and the leadership race and just generally in Canada's affairs right now?
I have written to Elections Canada. I do not believe we're prepared in any way for dealing particularly with the threat that's coming from Elon Musk, who's revealed himself to be dangerously anti-democratic. And he has one of the most powerful one of the powerful media platforms on the planet right now. And he's shown a willingness to interfere in the UK. He's shown a willingness to intervene in the EU. We see that the EU is demanding access to the algorithm to see if he is trying to push content for extremist groups. I'm asking Elections Canada to do the same thing. We have to protect our election right now. Justice Hogue has begged us to implement her recommendations, and I think her recommendations are only part of the broader threat that we're faced right now.
I'd like to also respond to that question. The Council of Canadians, our slogan is People, Planet, and Democracy. And through this pledge, we're calling on Canadians from all walks of life to organize, to move into action in their own communities across their whole sectors. In the signatories, you'll see leaders from the labor movement, from the student movement, from various community organizations all across this country. And every organization has a constituency that can be involved to build the power that's necessary to protect our democracy, to protect our economy, to protect our society. And so while it's a group of signatories, underneath those signatories is the power of millions and millions of Canadians. And we know from our struggle in the anti-globalization movement 25 years ago that the voices of people in many languages, in many spaces, becomes powerful and can actually change the course of history. We know from Canada, when water was being privatized everywhere across the world, Labour, Council of Canadians, environmentalists came together. We stopped the privatization of water in city after city after city. Meanwhile, in the UK, Thames Water, which was the poster child of privatization, is almost on the verge of bankruptcy, and one of our major pension funds has walked away from $1 billion worth of assets. So we understand the dynamics of people standing up for democracy, for their communities, and for the common good.
Moi, je vais ajouter quelque chose. Au Québec, on a un appel de boycott d'Amazon qui semble prendre de la force. So boycotting is one small step that people can take. I know just spontaneously people are calling for boycotts of American products. Don't buy American products when there's a very reasonable Canadian product. On peut commencer comme ça, tout en coupant son abonnement à Amazon, parce que on sait que ça va faire en sorte que 3000 personnes au Québec vont perdre leur job, alors que la situation économique est très difficile pour les gens. So that's one thing people can do. I've even heard people talking about dumping beer in the Halifax harbor, U.S. beer, which is terrible anyway.
We're not going to pollute the harbor.
There are lots of things we can do. So we're asking for people to be creative, utiliser leur créativité. We know Canadians are very creative, they're very funny, they're very nice, except when they're pushed around.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit more about that than the call to action for people here. Aside from sort of signing a pledge, what do you want to see people do? Are you asking people to go, like, be out in the streets protesting?
We're seeing already across Canada groups, individuals, people taking action. The idea of the Pledge for Canada was to bring people together with a set of values so that we focus. And that's what the Pledge is focused on, to have people from, I mean, I never thought I'd be signing a document with Danny Williams and Alan Rock, but hey, we're all Canadian and we all share those same values. And what we're saying is it doesn't really matter where we are on the spectrum of politics and culture. Canada comes first. Once we have started to build this movement, then now we have a network to start coming together with ideas. We're getting lots of creative ideas. I don't think it would be advisable for us now to sort of say the next step and what we're going to do. We're building the pledge, we're building the base of support, and we want to use it in a way that keeps pressure on our elected officials and our business leaders not to sell us down the river to the likes of Donald Trump.
Just another question for you here. There's a political scientist, Emmett McFarlane, who said it's time to sanction some American billionaires who are close to Trump. Do you agree with that?
Well, again, as my colleague said, we saw what Jeff Bezos did in Quebec to thousands of Quebec jobs for people daring to unionize. Well, to hell with Jeff Bezos. The right of Canadians to make their own decisions about employment is important. We see Elon Musk is a major threat to democracy. Whether or not we move on those steps right now, I'm going to defer to the government, who will have to respond to Mr. Trump tomorrow. But I think the pressure to hold these characters accountable in the way we held other oligarchs, particularly Putin's oligarchs, to account. Canada's going to have to defend itself. This is going to be a tough time. We're going to have to make tough decisions, but we have to be strong.
Like for me here, Canada and the Western world have long been able to rely on the United States as a partner, an ally, a leader in the world. Do you think we are too slow to react to what seems like an unprecedented shift from the Americans right now?
I think Canadians just assumed everything would be okay because they're our cousins. We know Americans. We live along the border. But what happened on November 5th was a dangerous shift, an anti-democratic shift, a threat that we see being played out with them going into schools to try and deport children. The suspension of basic democratic rule of law. Canada is susceptible to that. What I'm feeling, and I think what we feel, is that Canadians are out way further ahead than our politicians. Canadians get the threat. Canadians get the need to defend who we are. What's concerning is whether or not our leaders have our backs the way we Canadians expect. And this is part of why the pledge is here, is to push for this vision, to say these are our values and we're not trading them away. But we are going to have to step up very quickly.
I'm going to just jump in on that. And I think the call is for people to take their creativity and ensure that that's impacted in the political decisions that are made. I'm a cancer survivor. The stuff that I was given to work with for the first 10 years brought about the lymphoma that's running through my blood. But health and safety activists like me were able to dramatically change laws, dramatically able to change how products are created, and a mass movement that changed laws all across this country. We saw in Quebec the students with the Carouge standing up for the right to accessible education. We saw people demanding environmental and pollution laws so that lakes you could swim in again rather than being afraid you're going to get sick. We saw workers demanding the right to have public health care. There's a plaque in Windsor, Ontario by the auto workers that said, "We won the first industrial health plan of all workers in the 1950s. We will not rest till all Canadians have health care." We have examples from across this country, from Idle No More to people like Art Manuel and others, our ancestors who organized Punjabi farm workers in British Columbia. Our ancestors organized fisher folks to have a collective voice. Canadians have a lot of creativity. We understand how we can build power to demand a just world based on racial, economic, and climate justice.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
And that's what the call is, to step up, to use creativity, and to build the power to say we demand a better world, not one defined by Donald Trump.
And I'll just say one closing thought. I remember the days when we fought the free trade agreement and talked about Canada as a branch plant of the United States. And the agreement took place and was imposed on workers. And John alluded to the number of people who lost their jobs. People like my father, who was a unionized auto worker, who would have lost his job. So we're not just calling on the people of Canada. We're trying to put pressure on the leadership, political and economic, to develop a spine and push back against this. We know the Canadian ruling class has tended to be pretty compliant, but now even they are a bit nervous. We've seen Stephen Harper, Jean Chrétien. I bet a lot of people in the C-suite are thinking, whoa, what's going on now? So we need those people to start paying attention, serious, close attention to what we're saying and what the threat is, because it's very real. We've had tariff wars with the U.S. before. This one is probably the most extreme. So that's the purpose, I think, also in the long term. Now, that's very grandiose. We'll see how it goes.